we are counting down 10 American cars secretly engineered for a single state. For decades, the California Air Resources Board enforced emissions standards that were stricter than federal law, and rather than redesign nationwide, automakers built California-only versions of well-known models, the same name, the same body, a different machine. Some are so obscure that even serious collectors do not know they exist. From hidden calibration changes to altered engines, number 10 begins with a legend. In the 10th place, the 1970 Chevrolet Chevelle SS 454 stands as a paradox of muscle car legend and regulatory compromise. On paper, the LS6 engine promised 450 horsepower and a quarter-mile reputation, but California's air quality rules force subtle changes beneath the surface. Cars destined for the state left the Van Nuys assembly line equipped with smog-compliant hardware, air injection pumps, and extra plumbing, while the factory tune was quietly recalibrated. Retarded ignition timing and leaner carburetor jets dulled the low-end punch, with dyno tests and shop anecdotes suggesting a drop of 25 to 30 horsepower compared to federal models. Most buyers never saw the difference in brochures, but on the street, the California version felt softer off the line. Over time, owners routinely stripped away the emissions gear and reset the tuning, making untouched examples with original compliance equipment exceptionally rare and highly prized by today's collectors. The California variant of the Chevelle SS 454 set the stage for a new kind of muscle car, one engineered not for speed, but for a single state signature on the certification label. Number 9. The 1968 Ford Mustang 390 GT stands as an early example of how even minor regulatory shifts forced manufacturers to rethink familiar hardware for the California market. To satisfy the state's evolving emissions rules, Ford quietly revised the carburetor calibration on California-bound 390 GTs. The changes were subtle: a richer idle circuit, leaner main jets, and sometimes a different booster venturi, intended to pass California's bench tests without resorting to visible add-ons. Throttle response suffered, with drivers reporting a softer launch and sluggish acceleration compared to federal models. For many owners, the fix was simple: swap carb jets or revert to federal specification, erasing the compliance tuning in search of lost performance. As a result, untouched California-correct carburetors have become a rare find, and verifying a true survivor now requires careful inspection of casting numbers and service bulletins. In the world of Mustang collecting, these early compliance calibrations represent a hidden layer of history, one shaped not by marketing, but by the quiet force of regulation. 8th place belongs to the 1971 Plymouth Barracuda 340, a muscle car whose California version was shaped by the state's first full-year mandate for lower emissions. To satisfy the California Air Resources Board, called CARB, and its stricter standards, Chrysler engineers took the unusual step of reducing the engine's compression ratio from 10.3 to 1 down to about 8.7 to 1, while also dialing back ignition timing. These changes were not just bolt-ons, they altered the very architecture of the 340 V8. The result was a permanent loss of around 30 horsepower, leaving the California Barracuda noticeably softer in both sound and acceleration, despite looking identical to its federal counterpart. Head casting numbers and tune-up labels serve as the only reliable clues for collectors seeking an authentic survivor, since so many original engines were later rebuilt to regain lost power. For the Barracuda 340, California compliance meant irreversible changes, marking a turning point where emissions rules dictated not just add-ons but the very heart of the car. Number 7. The 1975 Cadillac Deville marks a watershed moment in California's battle against automotive pollution. For the first time, a full-size luxury car arrived with a catalytic converter as standard equipment, an engineering response to new state rules that went even further than federal mandates. Under the hood, the 500 cubic inch V8 engine was saddled with a pellet-style oxidizing catalyst, designed to scrub hydrocarbons and carbon monoxide from the exhaust. This hardware demanded unleaded fuel, enforced by a restrictor in the filler neck that physically blocked leaded gas nozzles. While the promise was cleaner air, reality brought a wave of reliability complaints. Owners reported heat-soaked engine bays, premature catalyst failure, and costly repairs that Cadillac service bulletins struggled to address. Many Devilles were quietly retrofitted back to pre-catalyst specification, making original California cars with intact emissions hardware a rare find today. For collectors, surviving examples are valued less for performance and more as evidence of a turning point, where regulatory power transformed even the most traditional American luxury cars. Number 6. The 1973 Dodge Charger 400 reveals just how far California's emissions rules pushed manufacturers into unfamiliar engineering territory. Unlike the federal models, California-bound Chargers arrived with a factory-installed exhaust gas recirculation system known as EGR, mounted directly on the intake crossover. This was no subtle change. The EGR valve, along with a distinctive vacuum tree and a maze of colored hoses, stood out in the engine bay, marking the car as a product of regulatory necessity rather than performance ambition. Dodge service manuals from the era detailed these unique vacuum routing diagrams, and restorer photographs confirmed the telltale hardware. The impact was immediate. Mid-range torque dropped by around 15 pound-feet, a penalty that left the Charger feeling sluggish compared to its out-of-state siblings. Many owners, frustrated by the complexity and loss of power, removed the EGR system at the first opportunity, making surviving examples with intact California emissions equipment a rare sight at shows or auctions. Today, the presence of original EGR hardware and correct vacuum lines is often the only way to authenticate a true California Charger 400, a forensic detail that separates compliance cars from the countless federal clones. Number 5. The 1969 Pontiac GTO, in its California smog pump configuration, marks a visible turning point in compliance engineering. Under the hood, the air injection reactor, known as the smog pump, became a fixture on Golden State GTOs, driven directly from the crank pulley and feeding fresh air into the exhaust manifold to help burn off unspent hydrocarbons. This hardware stood out in the engine bay, with cast brackets, diverter valves, and a complex web of hoses that made California cars instantly recognizable to anyone who knew where to look. Pontiac parts catalogs from the era list unique exhaust manifolds and mounting points, and period owner accounts recalled the distinct whine of the pump at idle, a mechanical reminder of Sacramento's regulatory reach. For collectors today, the survival of these original smog pump systems is a rare prize, since most were stripped away for performance or simplicity. Verifying a true California survivor comes down to these telltale brackets and plumbing, a detail that sets the compliance GTO apart from its federal twin. Number 4. The 1972 Chevrolet Camaro Z28 presents a case of regulatory compliance hidden in plain sight. Outwardly, California-bound Z28s looked identical to those sold elsewhere, yet the real difference lay deep in the ignition system. General Motors assigned a unique distributor, code 1112019CA, to these cars, paired with a vacuum advance canister engineered to limit total timing. The result was a lower high RPM ceiling, with the rev limiter quietly trimming nearly 400 revolutions from the red line compared to federal models. This subtle recalibration dulled the Z28's legendary top-end rush, a change invisible to the casual eye but obvious on a dyno sheet. No extra smog pumps or visible hardware marked the transformation. Only distributor code tables and timing stickers told the story. For collectors, authenticating a true California Z28 now means poring over paperwork and tracking elusive original parts, since so many were converted back to federal specification in search of lost performance. The rarity of untouched examples has turned these compliance-era Camaros into a quiet prize for those who value documentation over raw speed. Coming to the top 3, the 1970 Ford Torino Cobra reveals a deeper layer of California's regulatory impact, one that starts not with visible hardware, but with the camshaft and ignition curve buried inside the big block 429. For California, Ford engineers selected a milder cam grind, marked by the casting number C90XCA, and paired it with a timing gear retarded by 4 degrees. This combination dulled the engine's breathing and softened its low-end response, a direct response to the California Air Resources Board's stricter hydrocarbon and nitrogen oxide targets. Drag strip data from period owners and Ford's own spec sheets point to a loss of about 35 pound-feet of torque, a penalty that left California Cobras feeling noticeably less urgent off the line. Unlike bolt-on emissions gear, these internal changes were nearly impossible to reverse without major engine work, and few owners left them untouched. Today, surviving California correct Cobras are almost mythical, identified only by obscure cam casting marks and distributor ID numbers, and they offer collectors a rare window into the irreversible compromises of the compliance era. Number 2, the 1974 AMC Javelin. 401 stands as a case study in low-volume compliance under California's tightening grip. AMC, already operating on slimmer margins than Detroit's Giants, faced a unique challenge: retrofit the fading 401 V8 to pass CARB certification without the resources for a ground-up redesign. The result was a tangle of emissions plumbing, hoses routed across the engine bay in patterns found only on California cars, and a recalibrated Motorcraft 4300 CA carburetor with jets sized specifically for the state's bench tests. Even the thermostat housing was altered to accommodate new vacuum switches, a detail AMC flagged in technical bulletins but rarely documented in sales literature. With fewer than 500 California-spec Javelin 401s built, most were later stripped of their compliance hardware by frustrated owners chasing lost power or simpler maintenance. Today, authentic survivors are nearly impossible to verify, with club registries and concours judges relying on faded service stickers and obscure parts numbers. For collectors, the true California Javelin is less a muscle car and more an archaeological find, a fleeting artifact from the era when regulation rewrote the rules for even the smallest players. And finally, in first place, the 1975 Chevrolet Monza 262 E8 stands as the most elusive compliance car of its era. California's Air Resources Board granted this model a narrow approval, requiring a unique single-outlet catalytic converter and a catalyst-ready exhaust system that set it apart from every other Monza built that year. Fewer than 350 examples are documented with the build sheet code Z15CA, making it a footnote in both Chevrolet's history and the broader story of emissions regulation. For collectors, the challenge is absolute. Authenticating a true California Monza demands original paperwork, matching CARB executive orders, and intact, factory-installed catalyst hardware. Most were quickly modified or federalized by owners frustrated with the new technology, leaving genuine survivors nearly impossible to find. The Monza 262 V8's fragile provenance and minuscule production run capture the ultimate irony. Cars engineered for compliance, now valued for their untouched originality, represent the rarest artifacts of California's regulatory divide. Across every entry, one truth stands out. Regulation, not design, drove these California-only machines into existence. Behind familiar badges, hidden compromises lurked, spawning cars that collectors now struggle to verify. Their rarity is not just mechanical. It is born from a moment where compliance overshadowed performance, and documentation became the ultimate survivor. Thank you for watching.